do that starting recording thing.
Okay, welcome. It's again Peter Merrill and Stefan Wolpers of XScale Alliance. And today Peter will talk about the Seven Samurai Kanban for self-propagating transformation. Peter, what is this?
That's a very good question, Stefan. Look, I want to make certain we put it into a little bit of context. So for those new to XScale Alliance, just so you're aware of who the heck we are and why we are so hung up on dolphins. So we have a very different structure to the Agile industrial complex. We're trying to do something that's much more Linux oriented. We're not all about minting certificates. We're about capability uplift. And what we're going to do today is kind of the meat and potatoes of how we go about that. So, well, you could call this transformation. It is not transformation like you will see anywhere else, because what we're trying to do is a self-propagating transformation. So to do it, we have to get people involved who already know how to deliver business agility, how to deliver product management, agile delivery, performance, high performance, and DevOps. We can't train people to become coaches in these things. We certainly can't train them to become trainers. We need people who have already done it, who've already proved their ability. And we want to hand select them. So that's kind of the difference in where we structure ourselves. On the training side, I think just about everybody involved has developed a deep skepticism about people who don't do the work setting themselves up as trainers. We know a whole bunch of very well qualified coaches, and all coaches can train. They just need the training decks to do it with. So XScale is Linux in the sense of it's a group of people who have the skills, who are collaborating on building the collateral they need to be able to bring their skills to market. And it's a very flat structure, very open, and the entire intent for the thing is to be a descaled, agile organization, helping people to generate those things. And I'll explain what I mean by descale a bit later. Oh, before I go on though, I have a lot of wind, and maybe I should stop for a moment. Stefan, any questions so far?
I came across an article from Deloitte Australia this morning about the predictions for 2018 and business agility. And they were again talking about that scaling Agile would now be dominated by SAFe. And I thought to myself, okay, good. They include a photo with Steve Denning and a selfie, so to speak. Which I believe is a good thing. In and of itself. However, this focus on, okay, let's get some checklist out of the drawer and we help you becoming an agile organization is very, very bewildering to me, because I guess we all have spent so much time in the trenches so far that a kind of organized top-down we will become agile approach, initiative, whatever you like to call it, is simply not working.
Yeah. So there isn't a question in there, but I can imply a question. And actually I can apply several, because I'm actually a little bit amazed that Denning would throw in with the SAFe guys. Is that what you read?
No. The selfie was from the Deloitte Australia guys.
Okay.
So he was not holding up the SAFE thingy.
Yeah, he was just in an article where they were holding up the SAFe thingy.
He's on the same page, literally spoken. With
cool.
SAFe, so.
Well, look, I guess to begin with, we should be very clear that we're not knocking SAFe. There are certainly circumstances where SAFe is a really good pattern language to apply.
I absolutely agree.
And XScale combines very nicely with SAFe. It also really combines nicely with Spotify and LESS and DAD, and it's agnostic. So what do we do that those things don't do? Well, I think we'll see some of those things in just a minute. But the key thing is to do with how we roll this work out. We don't want to do a big waterfall style transformation that's trying to push Agile. That just seems a bit nuts. If we're going to deliver Agile, then we better do something that generates working agile value streams in a very short period of time, or at least one of them, and then grows the capability rather than trying to get everybody to change all at once and getting everybody stuck halfway and disrupting a lot of things. So it's not that SAFe is bad, but SAFe transformations. Stefan, what was the NPS score for SAFe that you had in your study last year?
I think it was minus 52 or something like that. I thought it was interesting as far as responses were concerned. So there were really strong and opinionated supporters of SAFe on the one side, and there were those who were opposing to the whole idea on the other side. There was basically no middle ground. That was interesting.
There's no way to make minus 52 sound like an achievement. I'm actually surprised that we don't have more people going, all right, really, let's try and do some science here. Because NPS is not really a very scientific thing, and everybody involved in your audience, if I understand correctly, you didn't have any kind of controlled selection of respondents, so we can't call that scientific. However, it's a really neat number.
No, absolutely not. And it was never an intention to bring up some kind of scientific study, ability and usefulness of formalized scaling methodologies for agile ideas, right? It was just driven, okay, what do you think about this? You know?
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I've been very careful in what I've been writing to avoid talking about SAFe or Scrum, except when I have specific things to say about them. But I don't like the idea of being political about this. When I write stuff that's kind of us and them, I generally have a go at what I call the Agile industrial complex. And you could think that's all of the above, but I don't mean it to be about anyone in particular or any method in particular. It's more a matter of there are a bunch of anti-patterns to do with how these things work. And I wrote a series last year of 10 commonplace anti-patterns in the Agile industrial complex and how we're hoping to disrupt them with this XScale approach. But look, I think I'd like us to try and nail this down a little bit. If it's okay with you, I'd like to go on a little bit through this deck and let's see. Yeah? Okay. So suffice to say, yes, we are tiddlers. We are tiny. We are we're the rebels. We're not the evil empire. But there are some people who may be thought of as having imperial allegiances who actually have been recognizing us, and that's really nice. All of these guys have their hearts in the right place, and it's really thrilling to find that we're not the only people who are seeing that this agnostic, descaling, self-propagating, business throughput-oriented approach actually has legs. So I should probably explain the Dolphins before we leave them behind. The idea is that if your idea about scaling is a command and control hierarchy with Agile just at the leaves, then you're more like a dancing elephant. And, well, the amount of biomass in an elephant is probably about the same as the biomass in a pod of dolphins, but the dolphins are more agile than agile. So looking at that as sort of a vision of the kinds of agile organization that we'd like to be building, that's kind of the metaphor. I'm going to skip over that one. Oh, I guess I should say, all right. So when we're talking about these dolphins, what we really mean is we want to attack this scaling anti-pattern. Let me explain why I think it's an anti-pattern. We have a lot of people who talk about big room planning. Well, I've seen big room planning, and it looks to me an awful lot like a way to reinforce command and control. But even if it wasn't, if it was very flat, well, it's very difficult for big rooms to have a high flow of learnings. It's very easy for people to form hierarchies, and those hierarchies are brakes on the flow of learning. So the deep hierarchies, whether it's in a big room or whether it's in the organization, you basically have a bunch of middlemen, and the learnings from one part, from the left hand, have to flow all the way through to right hand through all of this central stuff. When we look at the way that humans are constructed, the left hand and the right hand have a whole bunch of stuff connecting them before you get anywhere near a brain. There's lots of reflexes built in. There's lots of control loops built in. When you decide you're going to pick up a pencil, you don't have to think about what combinations of muscles you need to do it. There's autonomy in the way that your body is organized. And what's going on is less command and control and more mission command. So when we talk about self-directing portfolios, that's the sense in which we mean self-directing. And self-managing streams, this is not to say that let's take all the managers out and shoot them. It's more to say we would like servant leadership. We would like leaders rather than managers. And if we're going to have people who are being servant leaders, let's look at the kinds of protocol we need to make certain that that's their function. They understand how they're going to work with everybody else to foster self-organization. And that's kind of what's missing on the organizational end of Agile at the moment. So, shall I go on, Stefan?
Yes, please.
All right. Then I want to refer to a movie that I think an awful lot of Agilists have seen. And if you haven't seen The Seven Samurai, then stop listening to this right now, go out and sit down and waste 3 hours watching it, which it won't be a waste. Really, they should have called this movie The Seven Coaches, because it's a beautiful way of understanding how to change a culture and how to do it in a way that has no command and control, how to do it in a way that works one little bit at a time so that we can actually use Agile to deliver Agile. And so I want to use this as a metaphor. So if you haven't seen it, I expect you're going to go and see it. And if you don't go and see it, then I'm about to spoil it for you pretty thoroughly. This is a 1950s Akira Kurosawa movie, and it's beautiful as long as you have a little bit more patience than will be required for the Fast and the Furious. So it starts with a bunch of bandits, and these bandits are perched above a village, and they're talking about how they're going to ride down and rob the village. And then what the leader of the bandits says, well, actually, you know, we robbed this village just last year. They won't have got their new crops in yet. It's not worth a while. Let's do it in a little while, in a few weeks or a few months. And then we'll get all the rice and the other stuff those villages have been growing. Now, a lot of the bandits will have been dispossessed samurai. This is set in I think it's called Sengoku, the Warring States period. There was a period of 200 years of civil war. And this is set right at the end of that, where there were two problems facing the samurai. One was how are they going to work in a united Japan? And the other was how are they going to find employers when all of the civil wars have sort of stopped? Now, there's a reason the civil wars stopped that didn't have much to do with the samurai, and I'm currently working on a post about this called the Samurai and the Tea Master. But we're not going to go into that one here. We're going to stick with the movie. So anyway, while they're making their plans, one of the villagers overhears them and communicates the problem to the other villagers. And they have the world's most miserable open space. They're basically all sitting there hugging their knees, trying to figure out what we do. And the most common sentiment is that we should all go and kill ourselves because they're going to take our rice from us and we'll just starve to death otherwise. And at least this will prove a point. Well, some rebellious villagers suggest, why don't we go and hire some samurai? Now, before I move on, Stefan, any questions so far?
No, it's a nice narrative.
Cool. It's a beautiful movie. You just have to have a little bit of patience at the start because it uses a lot of framing conventions that, well, you know, we're used to all of the zap, pow, wham, bam stuff. And if you look at the way this movie is made, it is completely enthralling. It has action that you won't see in an Avengers or whatever. But the neat thing about it is that all of the narrative conventions we've come to expect, a lot of them derive from this movie. So There was a movie the Americans made afterwards called The Magnificent Seven. It's a bunch of gunfighters. It's based on this. And there's a Bollywood movie called Shoya, I think it is, that's more loosely based on Seven Samurai. But basically what happens is the villagers decide that they want to hire samurai, but some of the villagers go, well, you guys are crazy. I mean, we don't even have enough rice to feed ourselves. How are we going to afford samurai? And the headman of the village says, better find hungry samurai. So they do. Now, what has this got to do with transformation in the sense that we usually mean it? Well, we want to think about transformation breadth first. So usually transformation begins because you've got some sort of change drivers. There is some sort of problems in the way that the organization works, at least in the perception of the change owners, who are usually executives in the organization. So these change drivers, often, you know, as a coach, you'll get a brief. We would like you to do things in such and such a way. And you can please give us a Gantt chart to explain how long it's going to take. We're not going to work with any Gantt charts here. We're going to work with something we call a 3D Kanban. And the point of this 3D Kanban is to minimize the amount of breakout structure for the work. We don't want a huge backlog of ticky-tacky stories to talk about a transformation. We would like to have the minimum number of cards on the wall that we need to be able to represent what we're doing. Now, change drivers, well, the natural thing for us to think about is breaking them down into a bunch of epics once we understand the drivers, but the change owners often don't understand the change drivers, certainly not in terms of root causes. And often they only have part of the picture. So we would like to get together a group of people. We try to avoid talking about change agents. We'd rather talk about change leaders, servant leaders for change, and change participants. It's natural to think about change leaders as coaches, but what we would really like to do is we want the coaches to exit the change leadership as quickly as we can possibly get a fully agile value stream working. But we're getting ahead of myself. We want to bring together a bunch of people who have different viewpoints. Skeptics. We want people who are experiencing pains that the change owners aren't experiencing. We want people who understand the real technical and organizational constraints that we have to work with if we're going to get a transformation to happen, if we're going to be able to describe the change epics. So we start on the right-hand side here. It might seem weird that we're starting with an open space on the right-hand side, but the idea with this 3D Kanban is that there is a feedback loop. This open space is something we're going to use to inform a change canvas. I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. But what we want to do with this is we want to have an idea about whose behavior needs to change to have a successful transformation, to get agile, not just agile delivery, but DevOps and design and business agility. To make all of that work, we almost certainly don't have the right people in the room at the outset. So this initial open space, it's about raising the awareness, raising our awareness of what the problems are, but raising the organization's awareness of what the possibilities are. And also the frustrations, the pains, the constraints, everybody who is going to be affected by this, we would like to get them enrolled and empowered in doing this work. So what we usually do to organize the open space, we talk to the change owners. Who do you trust? Who are the people that you see as the change champions in the organization? And then we go and we talk to each of them and we ask them, really, who are the key change participants to make this work? And we limit the number of people that we go to. Depending on the size of the organization we're trying to get involved, it might be that we want 20 people at an open space. It might be that we want 200, but we don't want more than 200. If you have not experienced open space, you can Google that. I'm not going to talk about it very much now. Suffice to say, the United Nations uses open space extensively for groups up to 1,000. So we know that this is a very nice way to canvas people, to get them talking to each other, and to get a whole bunch of useful feedback about what kinds of problems and what kinds of solution ideas and what kinds of concerns and fears, all of that stuff. So what do we do with all of it? And open space gives you a bunch of notes. And what we're going to do with it is we're going to feed it into something we call a change canvas, which is a pirate canvas specialized to change. And a pirate canvas, you could think of it as kind of like a product canvas, but it's a combination of McClure's pirate metrics and ADZIC's impact mapping. And the reason we use it is pirate canvas is a very nice way to question the frame and to get a whole bunch of people to collaborate on looking at the broadest possible definition of a program, whether it's change or delivery, and getting aligned in doing that. And the output is what we call an epic landscape, where if you can think of an epic in the usual scrummy way, but for us an epic is why would we do something? We need to have a driver. Whose behavior would have to change to be able to satisfy that driver? How would it have to change? And what do we have to do to change it? So that why, who, how, what, that's our normal form for an epic or a change epic in this case. So that awareness raising in the open space, that gives us the basics of this. But we need to think about who's doing it. And there's one more thing we need to do at this outermost level. Stefan, any questions before I move on to the next bit?
No, it's running beautifully. Please continue.
Oh, I'm going to blush. Okay, so we need to run some sort of assessment. And actually, when I say we, I don't just mean that the change owners need to get a report that says, oh, yes, the organization is or is not ready to change in one way or another. They certainly do need that. Particularly, we need to be able to do enough understanding of what's going on at the moment to say, all right, here's the things that we can do, and here's what we cannot do. If we're going to generate an uncompromised agile value stream, we need to be able to make progress on business agility. And by that, I include reward structures, communication structures, a whole bunch of financial metrics. And we might not be set up to do that. We might not have the political support we need to do that. There might not be budget for that. That might be too ambitious. So we might be able to make some progress on product management. We might be able to make some progress on delivery performance or on DevOps. We might be able to do all four. We need to be able to do all four to do a self-propagating transformation. But that's not to say that we can't address a whole bunch of change drivers with something that is more about the components of an agile value stream than the end-to-end stream itself. So we need to assess the organization's readiness. We also need to have an ability for the organization to come to grips with who we are, and we have to be able to assess who do we want to be involved. When I talked about change champions before, well, someone can be very excited about change and think that they're very enthusiastic, and at the same time, when they get down to brass tacks, be more resistant to change than progressive for change. So in the movie, the oldest samurai is staying at an inn, and the villagers do quite a lot of assessment to try and figure out who they want to engage with, who they want their change leaders to be. And they don't even think they're change leaders. They think they're going to hire some samurai to defend the village. What's actually going to happen, they don't know it. 7 samurai cannot beat 40 bandits. The samurai have got to organize the village, or at least coach the village into a state of self-organization if they're going to be able to get this stuff to happen. So they don't know that the villagers have the readiness and the will to do this. And there are some ruffians at the inn who make fun of the villagers and of the samurai and say, haha, you're never going to get any money out of these guys. They're so poor that they're going to pay you in rice. And so the samurai look a bit dour at this. And then the ruffians laugh some more and they say, they're so poor, they're going to eat millet, birdseed, so that they can feed you rice. And then the samurai's ears perk up and they realize if these villagers are that desperate or that committed, well, then we can work with them. So they agree. And this is the moment in the movie where the samurai says, okay, well, we'll do it. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff where they do assessment in the movie, where, for example, the samurai set up an ambush where they try to hit the head of other samurais. They come in the door with a piece of wood on the grounds that if they can hit them on the head, they're no good as samurai. If they're offended by them trying to hit them on their head, then they don't have the right spirit to engage in this. And so there's only a few people who pass that litmus test. There are some equivalent tests we might think of when it comes to getting coaches together. But let's move on, because otherwise we'll take up far more than 30 minutes. Now, in fact, we're already, we've got 5 minutes to go. Stefan, should I go longer or should I speed up?
I think there are two options. A, we split this into 2 webinars, or B, we extend it a bit. I would say another 15 minutes are totally fine.
Okay, cool.
How far we can get.
Then I'll try and do both. I'll speed up a little bit, and we will we'll see. We could take it for an extra 15. Okay, so we've got 5 now, so together that's 20 minutes. All right. So we need to get alignment to happen. We have to get the change participants and the change leaders and the change owners to all come together. So again, I'm on the right-hand side of this diagram, this portfolio council. This is a council of representatives of the change participants, change owners, and change leaders. Now, to begin with, the start of this, we coaches, we samurai, we're the change leaders. That's going to change in itself. The change participants, well, these are the people who really know the constraints that we're working with in the organization. They know where the bodies are buried, and they know what kinds of technical and organizational debt we're facing. So we really need to get their representatives involved in a little council. If we don't, then it doesn't matter what the change owners think we ought to be doing. We're not dealing with reality. So we have to do that. So in the movie, when the samurai turn up at the village, all of the villagers are hiding because they can't tell the difference between samurai and bandits. They look much the same. And what's more, it turns out that the villagers have, in the past, they've actually killed wandering samurai. The samurai don't know that when they first turn up. So the samurai have to get the villagers to at least come out and talk with them. And so what happens is one of the samurai picks up this long hardwood pole and bangs on the end with a hammer. And the village is too poor to afford a bell, but that makes a ringing sound, and it's the village's bandit alarm. And so all the villagers come running out to defend themselves, and then the old man of the village explains, these people are not bandits, they're not here to harm you, they're here to help us. And so we get that alignment, and then we can start to think about what kinds of acceptance criteria are important to be able to deal with the kinds of epics that we've got out of our change canvas. We're working breadth first here, because in order to get an effective transformation, we have to continually think in terms of the breadth of what we're doing. If we work piecemeal, or if we try to get everything to change at once, we're going to wind up in a bad place. So just as we would need to break deliverable features out of epics in a delivery program, here we need to break change features out. And by features, I mean the smallest pieces of these epics that can actually have a concrete landing that we can get done and which will deliver some business value. In this case, which will deliver some improvement in business throughput. So that alignment piece is making certain we've got the right people to engage with us to be able to determine the contents of this acceptance matrix. And there's more to say about acceptance matrix, but we're going to leave the rest of that for another day when we talk more about product management, I think. So shall I move on, Stefan, or is there any questions?
Not so far.
Okay, cool. We only have a few people on, so I'm not surprised we don't have too many. All right. So in the movie, we have a lovely bit where the samurai wander around the village looking at what kinds of vulnerabilities are we dealing with? What bits of architecture do we have to put in place to make this place defensible? Where do we need to build a moat? Where do we need to put bamboo stakes? Where do we need to put pitfalls and walls and so on? And where can't we defend? There's a mill on the other side of the stream, and we have no way of protecting that. It may be extremely important to the village, but we're going to have to let the bandits destroy it if they decide they want to, because we don't have the wherewithal to be able to save it. So in our terms, architecture, we're interested in technical enablers, business enablers, organizational enablers. What kinds of things do we have to put in place before we could get any kind of an agile value stream to work? This alignment and architecture, that's work we do in the Portfolio Council. And that's work that we're basically using the acceptance matrix to figure out what kinds of things are going to be concerns of us. What categories of acceptance criteria do those things have? So now we have got to actually build this value stream. And to do that, we have to do more than just have a bunch of change features. We have to prioritize them. And we have to be able to talk in terms of milestones, change increments. Now, we have some simple ways of getting numbers on priorities, and they're much simpler than what you might be used to if you're used to a safe WSGIF kind of a thing. And they take not just cost of delay, but actual explicit ROI and the amount of budget we're going to need for each of these features. They take all of it into account. So who's going to be worrying about those priorities? We could say, oh, the Portfolio Council will, and they will give us all of the priorities. The trouble with that is we actually want this value stream we're building, we want it to be autonomous. We want it to be self-organizing. So we actually need to take our cue from the people who are the change participants. We will give them a whole bunch of space to form up. We'll do training and coaching as part of what we do to activate them. But we really need to focus on their numbers as much as our numbers. If we're going to set up an agile value stream, it has to be improving business throughput somehow. And we need analytics to understand that somehow. We can use those analytics to inform a pirate canvas that is about delivery. There's lots of other ways we can use them, but we have got to understand what numbers constitute the mission for that value stream. They have to have some numbers they're trying to improve. It's not enough to just throw them a spec. If they're going to be self-organizing, they have to know what numbers they're trying to improve. So these analytics, that's got to be the core of what enables them to be self-organizing. They have a mission that they are commanded to fulfill. Rather than having command and control, they have autonomy to fulfill their mission. And the mission is going to be about these analytics. So we have a stream council, and it has to include representatives of all of the chapters that would cut across the different kinds of competencies in the stream. I'm not going to explain Spotify model now, or for that matter, the extensions to it that we make based on the Haudenosaunee Great Treaty of Peace. That's a conversation for another day. But this is where we get our representatives for our stream council. This is a rotating council, which is to say we don't have the same people on it every time. This and the Portfolio Council, they both work to a very rapid cadence. They both work to a weekly cadence. This is all about continuous learning to go hand in hand with continuous delivery. So we have to have a weekly cadence. None of this, oh, let's wait 12 weeks and then spend 2 weeks grooming a bunch of stories so that we can have a big room planning meeting. No, we need these things to be running continuously and to observe the agony when you aren't going to need it when it comes to how we frame the work, both of change and of delivery. So that's why 3D Kanban, which is actually, we're looking at 3D Kanban, at least in the abstract at the moment. So we have the stream council, and the feedback loop here is reprioritizing the features in our change increments, in our release plan for change. In the movie, the samurai keep a chart of the number of bandits that have been killed, and that's their primary analytic. And they use this to adjust their battle plans as they see how different campaigns go on. So there are other analytics there that are more informal, but they do have analytics. And if you look at the rate at which they knock off the bandits, it actually happens at an exponential rate over the life of the film until in the last battle, the villagers kill, if I recall correctly, 13 bandits in a single battle. So, and most of it is the villagers themselves. So analytics, fantastic. What we want to do with these analytics is we want to analyze them, which is what you'd expect to do with analytics. And we want to analyze them to understand where are the bottlenecks. We have to troubleshoot. We have to seize opportunities. We have to accelerate. So when we think about working to build an agile value stream, first, we just have to get it working. Then we have to get it working reliably. And then we have to get it working fast. So this business of acceleration, that's all of that. And it's not just a matter of doing the work for them or demonstrating the work. We have to work with them as peers. Information only flows between peers. So that's why it's important that our coaches are servant leaders. I have seen people calling themselves coaches turning up and handing out Scrum Alliance tests and giving people all kinds of very prescriptive things. What we want to do is to be seen as people who are sources of expertise in the design of the change program and in the execution of the change program. But we don't want to be involved in a way that is command and control. Because if we do that, we're not going to make a self-organizing team. We're going to make one that's dependent on us. And, well, I don't know how long the average agile coach sticks around in an engagement, but we would really like to see the coaches exit after 12 to 16 weeks. And that might sound preposterous to you if you're a coach. How are you going to make money if you're only going to be there for 12 to 16 weeks? Well, our idea is if this works well, if it's cheaper and better and safer, then we're going to get a lot of those. And so we'd rather do it that way because we know that works. The big transformation up front, it never really works. You always get stuck halfway.
Peter, concerning the learning, we have a question from Gideon. How does continuous delivery and continuous learning work together?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think we have time to go into that now, though that was part of what I spoke on at the keynote for the Selenium Summit this week. But basically, this Seven Samurai Kanban that we're looking at mates on exactly to a 3D Kanban for delivery. And so perhaps we can have a look at that in a subsequent webinar. What do you think?
That would be great. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. But suffice to say, same cadence, but when we look at what's going on inside the delivery stream and inside a portfolio of those streams, a self-directing portfolio, we have very similar structures occurring, but they're much more around things that make sense in that delivery context. Here we're talking about transformation in general, and we're trying to make certain that if we're talking about business agile, product management, or any domain, could be the way hospitals work, could be the way that the police department works. It doesn't have to be about software delivery. We have ways of bolting these things together. Anyway, for another time. So we have to activate everybody, all the change participants. Now in the movie, well, you have a bunch of kids who are very afraid of the samurai to begin with. And the samurai dissolve this fear by making sweet rice cakes for them and then playing silly games with them. And the reason they're doing this is not just to break down the barriers, it's so that they can enroll the kids in sharpening bamboo stakes that they want to use both as barricade and as spears to deal with the bandits. Because these kids, their lives are at risk as well. So activating the change participants, getting them to work with us so that this is not an us and them thing. We're not pushing change into the organization. We're pulling members of the organization into this new culture. That's activation. And it's coaching, it's training, but it's more than that because it's about the conversations that go with it. And we would like to see as an output of this kind of work that we will generate a state of autonomy. Now, again, I'm spoiling the movie, but at the end of the Seven Samurai, well, not only are all of the bandits dead, but a bunch of the samurai are dead as well. And one of the samurai, the remaining samurai, says to the other, well, so we won. And the older samurai looks very grave and he says, no, we lost. We always lose. But the village has won. And that's what we want here. We at the end of the movie, you have all of the ladies of the village singing and planting rice to feed the babies that they're going to raise, and all the men of the village pounding drums and bringing the rice seeds, and the whole village is working together. And it isn't just, it is a village that can now defend itself against bandits. That's great. But it's a village that has become a highly productive organization in its own right, and where the people have got the spirit of adaptability that they need to be able to deal with whatever comes. So they're no longer on their knees as they are at the start of the movie. And you could interpret this to be a sexist trope, but I don't think of it that way. It's more a matter of everybody who's involved in the village is interested in growing the population and growing the productivity. And you have to remember, this is a movie that was written during the American occupation of Japan, and which was produced in the 2 years afterwards. So this movie was very much intended to inspire the Japanese to get off their knees, but not to go back to their swords, not to go back to the way of the samurai, but instead to look at how they were going to pick themselves up and what they were going to do with themselves. And I dare say that quite a lot of people who were involved in Toyota production system were very heavily influenced by this movie. But I don't have any evidence of that, and I would love to have some. If anyone has any out there, do please forward it, and we'll try and enroll it. I should also say that's key to the way that we work in XScale Alliance. We are not a hierarchy with some grey-haired old man at the top who sort of hands down the ideal form of Agile on stone tablets. We are a learning community, and we self-organize to do this in the same way as our clients do. So how do we do this activation and autonomy? Well, yes, we have training. We have training in business agility, in product management, in agile programming, which was, XP, BDD, CI/CD, all of that kind of stuff. And in DevOps. We need all of those disciplines to be able to form an uncompromised agile value stream. It doesn't actually deliver the business value that we expect to get out of a transformation if we can't do all of them. We are working with just a tiny, slender thread of the organization. The change champions for design, delivery, and DevOps all pull together so that they don't have to worry about people who are resistant to change, and so they can prove the pudding up front. So where we form chapters in that value stream and we hold retros, the function of those chapters and retros is a feedback loop where it prioritizes the training and coaching that the change leaders, as servant leaders, are going to provide. So that's why we have the right-hand side of this diagram is all change participants, and the left-hand side is the change leadership. And when we get to a point that we have autonomy, when that stream is working reliably and fast, then we split it right down the middle and we backfill with the people in the organization who have trust relationships with the people in that stream who would like to come and join it. We've built up that appetite. So at the end of a change increment, we run another open space. And this is both to communicate the benefits that have been proved to date and also to determine who has the appetite to join. For the people who join, they are learning by immersion rather than instruction. And they're learning from people they trust, not from external change agents. We're still available for consulting and so on. And if we haven't got all the way to it working reliably and fast, then, well, maybe we'll make it 16 weeks rather than 12. But we certainly don't need an awful lot of time to do this. This is how Agile got its start. We didn't start with all of these trainers and coaches and certificates. There weren't any. I was involved in XP in the 90s. We didn't have any of that, and it worked just fine. If it didn't, then we wouldn't be here today. So this model is all about taking the surplusage, the stuff that's grown up around delivering real working agile value streams, and saying, well, okay, let's cut it back to its bare bones. Let's do it properly, and let's use this Seven Samurai idea as a model until a better model turns up. Oh, Stefan, I've been talking a lot. What do you think? Is that a stopping point?
Yeah, that's a good one, except we have still two questions from Gideon.
Oh, go ahead.
Two different Kanban.
Yes. So what's the question?
Yes. Two different
That,
Kanban, question mark.
oh, okay. So what we're looking at here is a Kanban that's all about change. And it's different to a Kanban that is about delivery. So I've got some slides on that, but again, I don't want to do something half-assed. So let's make that a topic for a webinar to come. What's the second question?
The second question, if too many people are in one room, learning slows down. How does open space maximize learning flow?
Oh, it's a really good question. So in an open space, we have a number of ways of organizing a large room of people into a bunch of small gatherings. Usually it involves putting up a marketplace of ideas, getting people to add their ideas to this marketplace, and anyone who adds an idea will end up facilitating a session on it. If we define 20-minute time boxes and maybe 6 or 7 little cubby holes to meet in, and we have a 3-hour open space, then that's, let's see, 6 times 3 hours times 3 20-minute slots. So that's 6 times 9, that's 45 little sessions on different subjects of interest. And the subjects can be concerns, they can be metrics, they can be opportunities, they can be ideas, visions, whatever it is. And we get the facilitators to keep notes about the information, about the conversations, and the learnings that come out of those conversations. And then we get those facilitators to work with us on this change canvas as well. So it's a very nice way to very rapidly engage with a broad range of not just the change participants, but the people in the organization who are carrying concerns or hopes for what we do, and get all of their ideas on the table.
Great. Peter, thanks a lot for your time and your patience. What are we going to talk about next week?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, I think let's take that offline for now, because I think we need to look at what we're going to talk about in coming weeks. And I reckon this is something that we want to kick around in XScale Alliance itself and gather a few ideas from our peers and colleagues. Nice. Yeah, rather than me doing the gray-haired old man thing. I love, obviously I'm long-winded, so I love this kind of a format, but I also want us to do a bunch of guest sessions with the highly experienced stewards and coaches we've got in the Alliance. And really, I want to canvas everybody and circulate lots of people through this, so then you and I can do the asking of questions, and I can save some of my wind. But we'll intersperse that with stuff that is very practical, so product management techniques and business agility techniques and agile delivery performance techniques and DevOps. We've got some really amazing, kick-ass, weird and wonderful new ideas on the DevOps end, stuff like BBD2, B2D2 it's called now, and beyond BDD. And these ideas, we're just at the start of some of them. Others we are training and delivering to our clients right now. And so, but we want to make this as wild and woolly as possible. I would love to have a session that's just on the Muhin Shu versus Shu Ha-ri. Lots of people have heard of Shu Ha-ri. Very few people have heard of Muhin Shu, and both of them come from the Japanese tea tradition. I'm writing a post on this at the moment, and I'm enormously excited about it. But let's do some really concrete, practical things before we get to things like that. I thought today was at a nice level, but I think there must be a lot of people out there who are looking at the green and yellow and pink boxes and going, what do you put on those cards? And so I think we have to do some brass tack stuff too.
Awesome. Then let's do some planning, some topic picking, and let's draw a kind of schedule so we have a more consistent planning, so to speak, people can actually relate to and pencil in the calendars, right?
Yeah, let's do a pirate canvas for it. Okay.
Awesome.
No worries, Stefan. That's a good stopping point, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye.